Just 3 weeks after my hip replacement surgery, my son-in-law kicked my wheelchair so hard that I went tumbling down the mountainside. He looked down at me without a trace of emotion and said, "You can lie here and die. This house is going to be ours." Then he climbed back into the car and drove away, leaving me alone on the freezing mountain road. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, another car pulled over. A woman stepped out, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "I've finally found you. I want to say something before this story begins. I am grateful you chose to spend your time here. Tell me in the comments what city or country are you joining from tonight. That little detail means more to me than you know." Some elements of this story are fictional, added to bring the message to life. Names and locations are coincidental, the lesson, however, is not. The first thing I felt was the cold. Not the cold of a Tennessee November night, the way you feel it when you step outside and zip your jacket up. This was different. This was the cold of asphalt, wet, gritty, unforgiving, pressing flat against my back through a thin cotton shirt, pulling the warmth out of my body 1 degree at a time. My left hip screamed, not ached, screamed. 3 weeks out from a total hip replacement, and I had just hit the ground hard enough to rattle my back teeth. I lay there for a moment and did not move. Not because I was giving up, because I was taking inventory. Left hip on fire. Right shoulder bruised where I had tried to catch myself. Both palms scraped raw against the asphalt. Head clear. Heart still beating, which under the circumstances felt like something worth noting. I tried to roll onto my side. My hip sent a bolt of pain straight up through my spine that made my vision go white at the edges, and I dropped back flat. I pressed my lips together and breathed through my nose, slow, counted, deliberate, the way they teach you in the service when everything is going wrong, and panic is the only thing that will make it worse. "Okay," I said out loud. My voice sounded strange in all that silence. Thin, like it did not belong there. There was nobody to hear it. That was the part I had to make peace with. There was not a single light visible in any direction. No houses, no other cars. Just the 2-lane mountain road cutting through the dark hills of East Tennessee, and the sound of wind moving through the bare November trees on both sides of me, and the distant groan of the mountains, doing what mountains do, standing there indifferent, older than anything I could name. My wheelchair lay on its side about 10 feet away. One of the rear wheels was still spinning, slowing now, catching the faint light from somewhere, the moon maybe, or just the particular gray of a cloudy night sky, turning, then finally stopping. Marcus had thrown it like it weighed nothing, because to him it did. I did not think about Marcus then. I made myself not. Because anger burns energy, and energy was something I could not afford to waste. Instead, I pressed my elbows into the road and pushed. My right arm held. My left gave out on the wet surface, and I went down again, cheek scraping against the asphalt. And I felt the sting bloom across my face like something lit a match underneath my skin. I laughed. I do not know why. Maybe because it was either laugh or lie there and feel sorry for myself, and I have never been much good at the second one. "All right, Walt," I said, because Ellie used to call me Walt when she was serious. "Figure it out." I thought about Ellie then, not as something sad, but as something steady. The way she would sit at the kitchen table in the mornings with both hands around her coffee mug, not talking yet, just watching the light come through the window over the sink. She had a particular kind of patience about her. The kind that is not passive. The kind that is quietly, absolutely certain that things will work out because she had decided they would, and she meant it down to the bone. And then I thought about Cheryl. Not the woman who had stood on this road an hour ago with her arms crossed and her face turned away. The other Cheryl. The one who was 7 years old and used to run to the front door every evening when she heard my truck in the driveway, bare feet slapping the hardwood yelling, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home," like it was the best news she'd heard all day. I used to scoop her up with one arm, and she would smell like Johnson's baby shampoo even at 7, because Ellie said it was still the best thing going. I did not know where that little girl had gone. I pressed my elbows down again, braced harder this time, and I started to move. Not standing. Not crawling exactly. Something in between elbows and one good leg, dragging myself toward the center of the road, where at least I would be visible if any headlights came around the bend. The asphalt tore at my forearms through the fabric of my shirt. I did not stop. An inch. 3 inches. A foot. I did not know how long I had been out there. Long enough that the cold had moved past my skin and was working on something deeper. Long enough that my fingers had stopped hurting and started going numb, which I knew was not an improvement. And then I saw it. Light. Coming around the upper curve of the mountain road. Moving slow, careful, the way someone drives when they know a road well enough to respect it in the dark. Every muscle I had left went into getting myself upright. I shoved up onto one knee the good, and I got my right arm over my head, and I waved. A 72-year-old man on a dark mountain road in the middle of a cold Tennessee night, waving his arm at a pair of headlights and praying with everything he had left. The vehicle slowed. It stopped. A door opened. But before I tell you who stepped out of that truck, before I tell you what happened next, and how it all ended, you need to understand how I got here. Because this story does not start on this road. It starts in a kitchen 40 years ago with a woman I loved more than I have ever found the right words to say. And if you want to understand what happened on this mountain, you have to understand her first. My name is Donald Whitfield. Most people who know me call me Don. I am 72 years old. I spent 20 years as an Army mechanic before I came home to Knoxville, Tennessee, hung up my uniform, and went to work doing the same thing I had done in the service, keeping machines alive that other people depended on. 35 years of crawling under vehicles, breathing exhaust, and coming home with grease under my fingernails that no amount of scrubbing ever quite got out. My hands still look like it. Calloused and scarred and thick across the knuckles in a way that tells you more about a man's life than most things he could say out loud. My knees gave out before the rest of me did. Occupational hazard. 4 decades of hard physical work will wear down cartilage the way water wears down stone slowly, then all at once. The left hip followed. By the time the doctor used the phrase, total hip replacement, I was not surprised. I was just tired. But none of that is what I need to tell you about. I need to tell you about Eleanor. Ellie. That is what I called her from the 3rd date onward when she told me Eleanor sounded like somebody's grandmother, and she was 24 years old, and I should act accordingly. She had a way of saying things like that, direct, a little dry, with her chin tilted up just slightly, that made you want to argue with her even when she was completely right. Which she usually was. We met at a church picnic in the summer of 1978. She was standing next to a folding table loaded down with casserole dishes, wearing a yellow dress, laughing at something the woman next to her said with her whole face involved in it, eyes crinkling, head tipping back. I stood there with a paper plate of potato salad and forgot entirely what I was doing. "You're going to drop that," she said without even looking at me. I looked down. The plate was tilting. "I've been watching you stand there for about 2 minutes," she added. And then she did look at me, and I felt it go straight through the center of my chest, like something had been rearranged in there. I was just deciding what to eat next, I said. No, you weren't, she said, and she was smiling. We were married 14 months later. Ellie taught third grade for 31 years. Not because it was easy, it is not, and anyone who tells you otherwise has never tried to explain fractions to 28 eight-year-olds at 2 in the afternoon in May. She taught because she believed the way some people believe in things deep in the bone, that what happened to a child in those first few years of school either opened a door or closed one. And she was determined to open every door she could reach. She called me her mechanic. More specifically, she introduced me to every person she ever met as my mechanic, my handyman, and my best friend in that order. I told her every single time that I was going to stop letting her say it. She knew I never would. I think that was part of the point. We built this life together in a 3-bedroom house on the east side of Knoxville, a bungalow with a covered porch and a backyard big enough for a vegetable garden that Ellie tended every spring like it was a personal mission. I built 2 rocking chairs for that porch out of white oak in 1987. They are still out there. After dinner every evening that the weather allowed, we would sit in those chairs and listen to the neighborhood settle down around us kids being called in dogs, barking the particular sound of a Tennessee evening going quiet. And Ellie would tuck her feet up under her and rest her head on my shoulder, and we would not say much of anything at all because we had already said everything that needed saying. And after enough years with a person you love, silence stops being empty. We had one daughter, Cheryl. Born 1986 when I was 34 years old and absolutely unprepared for what it would feel like to hold something that small and know that your entire purpose on this earth had just rearranged itself without asking permission. I coached her soccer teams. I drove her to school every morning for 8 years because she liked talking in the car and I liked listening to her. I sat in the bleachers at every school play she was ever in, including the one where she played a talking turnip in 2nd grade, and delivered her one line with the total conviction of someone who had trained for this moment. I taught her how to change a tire when she was 15, how to check her oil, how to tell when a belt was starting to go just by listening. I told her what I believed then and believe now: a woman who knows how to fix things does not have to wait for someone else to fix them for her. Cheryl grew up. That is what children do. And then Ellie got sick. I am not going to spend a long time on that part, because it is the part of this story that belongs only to Ellie and me. And some things are private even when you are talking to strangers. What I will say is this: it was fast, and it was not fair. And for 41 years, she had been the person I talked to about everything that mattered, every worry, every decision, every ordinary moment that needed a witness. And then one morning she was gone, and the house was so quiet it had a sound of its own. She left a cup of tea on the end table beside her chair. She had not finished it. I stood in that living room after everyone left, after the neighbors and the friends and the pastor and Cheryl and her husband had finally gone home, and I looked at that cup for a long time. Then I walked to the kitchen and stood in front of the stove and could not remember a single thing about how to cook dinner. I sat down at the kitchen table. I looked at her empty chair across from me, and I said out loud to no one, to the air, to whatever was left of her in that room, "What am I supposed to do now, Ellie?" The house did not answer. It was the first time in 41 years that it hadn't. I thought losing her was the hardest thing I would ever have to survive. I was wrong, but before I get to what walked through my front door 2 years after Ellie died, I need to tell you about someone else. Someone who has no part in what came later, and yet is the entire reason this story ends the way it does. It was a January night, maybe 30 years ago now. Cold enough that the windows in the kitchen had fogged up around the edges. I was at the table reading the paper, which is what I did every evening after dinner back then, and Ellie was sitting across from me with both hands wrapped around her mug, not talking, just thinking. I knew the difference between Ellie thinking and Ellie being quiet. When she was quiet, she looked peaceful. When she was thinking, she got this small crease between her eyebrows and her lips pressed together just slightly, like she was working something out. I put the paper down. "What's on your mind, Ellie?" She looked up. "One of my kids," she said. "Which one?" "A little girl. Her name is Naomi." She paused, turned the mug in her hands. "She came to school today with a hole in her shoe, Walt. Not a small one, a real one. I could see her sock through it. And it rained all morning. I waited. She has no parents," Ellie continued, and her voice had gone soft in the way it did when something had genuinely gotten under her skin. "Lives with her grandmother. Woman named Ruth, older, not well, getting by on almost nothing. And this little girl." She stopped, pressed her lips together harder. "Walt, she turned in the best essay in the whole class this morning. 7 years old. She wrote about what she wanted to be when she grew up, and it was the most earnest, most carefully spelled, most completely serious piece of writing I have seen from a child that age in 31 years of teaching." "What did she want to be?" I asked. "Someone who helps people," Ellie said. And her eyes went, and she blinked hard, because Ellie did not cry easily, but she cried honestly when she did. "I don't want her to have to stop going to school because there's no money, Walt. I can't stop thinking about her." I folded the paper. "How much does she need?" Ellie looked at me. "Walt." "I'm not asking to argue about it," I said. "I'm asking how much." She told me. It was not a large number. It was the kind of number that if you have it, you do not think twice about. We had it. "I'll write a check tomorrow," I said. "You make sure she gets it without feeling like charity. Kids that age don't need to feel like they owe anybody anything. They just need to be able to show up." Ellie reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her eyes were still bright. "You're a good man, Walt Whitfield. I'm a man with a wife who sees the right thing," I said. "Now drink your coffee before it goes cold." She laughed. That small, real laugh she had. And that was that. For years after that, every first of the month I wrote a check and handed it to Ellie. I did not know what Naomi looked like. Did not know her last name. The few times the girl came to the house, and it was only once or twice Ellie bringing her home for dinner when the weather was bad, I was still at the shop. I knew she existed. I knew she was Ellie's girl, the one she talked about the way you talk about something that matters to you quietly and consistently, and without making a big production of it. I knew when Naomi won second place at a district speech competition in 9th grade. I knew when her grandmother Ruth had a health scare in 8th grade. And for 2 weeks, Ellie came home from school with that crease between her eyebrows every single evening. I even said one night, sitting at this same kitchen table, "You think they'd let us take her in if it came to that?" Ellie went very still. Then she stood up and walked around the table and hugged me from behind, her arms around my shoulders, her chin on top of my head, and she did not say anything for a long moment. "Ruth's going to be okay," she finally said. "The doctors think she's going to be okay." And she was, and we never spoke of it again. I wrote the last check the spring Naomi finished college. Ellie came home that afternoon with her face lit up like Christmas morning. She graduated, Walt, with honors. She sat down across from me and put both hands flat on the table like she needed to feel something solid. "I am so proud of that girl I could burst." "You should be," I said. "You're the reason she got there." "We are," Ellie corrected me. After Ellie died, I found an envelope in the drawer of her desk. Unsealed. Inside was a handwritten note on her school stationery, the kind with the little apple in the corner she had used for 30 years. It was addressed to Naomi. It said she hoped Naomi knew that someone had always been rooting for her, that she and Walt had never stopped, and that she was proof that the right kind of attention, at the right moment, could change the entire direction of a life. Ellie had not known Naomi's address after she moved away, so the letter had never been sent. I put it back in the drawer. I told myself I would find a way to get it to her someday. I forgot. Grief will do that to you. It takes up so much space that other things slip through the cracks. I had no idea sitting in that house alone 2 years later that the little girl in that letter already knew exactly where I lived. About a month before that night on the mountain, my left hip finally gave out completely. I had been managing it for 2 years with anti-inflammatories and stubbornness, which is the combination most mechanics my age rely on, and it works right up until it doesn't. My orthopedic surgeon, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Paulson, who had the bedside manner of a very competent drill sergeant, sat me down in October and said, "Mr. Whitfield, we are past the point of managing. We are at the point of fixing." "How long for recovery?" I asked. 6 to 8 weeks before you are fully weight-bearing. You will need assistance for the first 4. "I live alone," I said. She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Then you will need to arrange for that assistance." The surgery itself went fine. I went under at 7 in the morning and woke up at noon with a new joint, and a nurse named Beth standing beside the bed, writing something on a clipboard. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, without looking up. "How's your pain level?" "Present," I said. That got a small smile out of her. "On a scale of 1 to 10, 6, maybe 7. I've had worse. I'll get you something for that." She made another note. "You've got someone coming to pick you up when we discharge you." "My daughter," I said. Beth nodded and left. I lay back and looked at the ceiling and thought about Ellie. Not in a grief-stricken way, more the way you think about someone who has always been the person you would call when something happened. Something happened. Hip surgery. She would have been here before I woke up sitting in that plastic chair beside the bed with a crossword puzzle and a thermos of coffee, and when I opened my eyes she would have said something dry and funny about the hospital gown, and I would have felt fine. The first night was the hardest. Beth came back at 11 to check my vitals. I was lying with my eyes open, not sleeping, not reading the book I had brought, just looking at the ceiling tiles and counting them for no particular reason. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, frowning at the monitor. "You need to rest. That was a significant procedure today." "I know," I said. "I'm working on it. Is there anything I can get you? You want me to turn the TV on?" "No, thank you." She wrote something down. "Family coming tomorrow." My daughter said she'd try to stop by. Something in the way I said it must have landed wrong because Beth stopped writing and looked at me directly for the first time. She had the kind of face that has seen a lot of hospital rooms and knows how to read what people are not saying. "You want me to call anyone for you tonight?" she asked. "Friend, neighbor, anyone?" I thought about Frank Delwood, who would have driven over in 15 minutes without a single complaint. I thought about calling him at 11 at night and waking up his wife, Margaret, who had a bad hip of her own and did not need the disturbance. "No," I said. "There's nobody to call." Beth looked at me a beat longer than was strictly professional. Then she said quietly, "You did good today, Mr. Whitfield," and turned off the overhead light and closed the door behind her. I lay in the dark and listened to the machines and thought about all the times I had sat in a chair exactly like the one beside my bed in rooms exactly like this one while Ellie slept. I had never once left before she woke up. Not once in 8 months of treatment. I had brought crossword puzzles and a thermos, and I had sat in that chair and I had stayed. The second day, Frank Delwood showed up. He did not call first. He just appeared in the doorway at 9 in the morning with a cup of coffee from the place on the corner and a folded newspaper under his arm, wearing the same canvas jacket he wore every Saturday to mow his lawn. "Frank," I said, "you don't have to be here." "I know," he said, dropping into the chair beside the bed. He opened the newspaper. "I'm not here. I'm just reading the paper. You're not even in the room." He came back every day I was in that hospital. Every single day. Cheryl came once. Day 2 around 2 in the afternoon. She stayed 20 minutes, checked her phone twice while she was there, told me the house would be ready when I got home, and kissed me on the forehead on the way out. I told myself she was busy. I told myself people show love in different ways. Marcus did not come at all. On day 3, though, they came together. And Marcus was carrying flowers. Marcus Booker walked into my hospital room on day 3 carrying a bouquet of yellow tulips and a handshake so firm it told you everything about a man who had practiced it. Don. He said my name the way salesmen say it, warm, immediate, like he had been thinking about me specifically. He set the tulips on the windowsill without asking if I liked flowers, pulled the chair beside the bed around so it faced me directly, and sat down with his elbows on his knees. The posture of a man who wants you to think he is being straight with you. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like someone replaced my hip," I said. He laughed. Big, easy laugh. Cheryl stood near the door with her arms crossed, loosely smiling at the right moments, which is different from smiling because something is funny. "Don," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly, "Cheryl and I have been talking. We're worried about you going home alone after something like this." "I've been alone for 2 years," I said. "I manage fine. This is different." He said it gently, the way you talk to someone you've already decided needs to be redirected. "This is major surgery. You're going to need help with everything, getting in and out of bed, cooking, medications, physical therapy appointments. It's a lot for one person." I looked at Cheryl. She was nodding along with everything her husband said, and there was something about the choreography of it, the way he leaned in exactly when she nodded, the way her agreement came just a half second after his words, that made me feel like I was watching something that had been rehearsed. "We thought," Marcus continued, "why don't we stay with you for a while, just until you're back on your feet? We can work from home. It makes sense." I looked at my daughter. "Cheryl," she smiled. "It'll be like old times, Dad." I sat with it for a moment. There was something in my chest that was not quite right, a low, quiet feeling like a floorboard that sounds different under your foot than the ones around it. But she was my daughter. She was Ellie's daughter. And I was 72 years old with a brand new hip and an empty house. "Just until I'm back on my feet," I said. "Exactly," Marcus said, immediately. Like he had been waiting for precisely those words. I thought about that later. How fast he said it. How ready he was. The morning they discharged, Cheryl pulled her car to the hospital entrance at 10 o'clock sharp. It was a cold, bright November morning, the kind Tennessee does in late fall, where the sky is completely clear and the air has that particular sharpness that gets into your lungs and reminds you you're alive. I remember thinking it felt good to be going home. Then I saw the truck, a full-size moving truck, not a rental van, a proper moving truck, parked sideways across my driveway, its back doors open. 2 men I had never seen in my life were carrying a large gray sectional sofa through my front door. "Cheryl." My voice came out lower than I intended. "What is that?" "It's just some of our things, Dad." She did not look at me when she said it. We need to be comfortable too. We're going to be there for a while. That sofa. Where's it going? To the living room. We moved yours to the garage. It was getting a little worn anyway, and we thought, you moved my sofa to the garage. I did not ask it. I said it back to her the way you repeat something when you need to hear it out loud to believe it. Dad, it's fine. That sofa. I said, and my jaw was tight enough that I had to work to keep my voice level. Is where your mother sat every Sunday morning for 30 years, with her coffee and her book. Every Sunday morning, Cheryl. For 30 years. My daughter finally looked at me. Her expression was not guilty. It was patient. The particular patience of someone who has already decided how this conversation ends. Come on, she said. Let's get you inside. I sat in the wheelchair and watched two strangers carry furniture into my house, and I did not say another word. Inside, I met Patrice Booker for the first time, Marcus's mother. She was standing in my kitchen with a Tupperware container of what turned out to be lemon pound cake, and she said, "Don, we have heard so much about you," in a voice so smooth it could have been butter on a warm skillet. She walked me through my own living room like a real estate agent showing a property. Her eyes moved to the crown molding the width of the hallway, the south-facing windows in the den. "What a lovely space," she said. "Good bones, really good bones." She asked how many square feet. She asked what year the house was built. She asked whether the floors were original hardwood. I told her I was tired from the drive and needed to rest. That evening, I sat on the back porch in my wheelchair and watched the last of the November light leave the yard. The vegetable garden Ellie had kept for 20 years, now just bare earth, the oak tree at the back fence still holding a few brown leaves. Behind me inside the house, I could hear Marcus and Patrice talking in low voices. I could not make out the words. Just the rhythm of it, easy, unhurried, the cadence of people who are comfortable in a place they have already decided belongs to them. I thought about what Ellie had whispered to me 12 years ago at a table covered in white linen with wedding music playing softly in the background. Watch that man, Walt. And then Frank Delwood knocked on the back gate. Eleanor's recipe. Frank said, setting a pot on my kitchen counter. Margaret made a big batch, said it looked like nobody over here had cooked a proper meal since Tuesday. I looked at the pot. Chicken soup, I could smell the thyme and black pepper from across the room. My chest did something complicated at the smell of it, because Ellie had made that same soup every winter for 40 years, and it had always meant the same thing: somebody in this house is being taken care of. Tell Margaret I said thank you, I said. Frank pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down like he owned it, which is the particular confidence of a man who has been your neighbor for 22 years and knows he is welcome. He poured himself coffee from the pot on the counter without asking, wrapped both hands around the mug, and looked around the kitchen. His eyes stopped on the window above the sink, specifically on the curtains. "Those are new," he said. "Patrice put them up 2 days ago." Frank looked at the curtains for another moment. Heavy burgundy fabric, the kind that belongs in a hotel lobby, not a kitchen window in East Tennessee. Then he looked back at his coffee. "Where'd the other ones go?" "Trash, I think." Frank's jaw moved slightly. "Eleanor made those curtains." "I know she did. She made them out of that fabric she bought at the quilting shop on Market Street, right after you moved in." "I know Frank." He drank his coffee. His knuckles were white around the mug. For Frank Delwood, that was the equivalent of another man standing up and shouting. I had not told him about the curtains until just now, but the curtains were only the beginning. The first full day after I came home, Patrice had knocked on the door of the master bedroom. My bedroom, the one I had shared with Ellie for 38 years, and opened it without waiting for an answer. "Dawn," she said, looking around the room with that appraising sweep I was already learning to recognize. "This room gets the best light in the whole house. I think this would really suit me much better than that back room." I turned my wheelchair to face her directly. My voice came out completely calm, which surprised even me. "That is my wife's room, Patrice. It was her room. Nobody is sleeping in there." Patrice smiled the smile of someone who is accustomed to waiting out other people's feelings. "Eleanor has been gone for 2 years, Dawn. You can't keep living in the past. It's not healthy." Something went through me then, not anger exactly, but something colder and more settled. "Find another room," I said. She found the back bedroom, but the curtains disappeared the next morning, and the day after that I woke from a nap to find the bookshelf in the living room empty. Ellie's books, every one of them. 30 years of paperbacks and hardcovers, each one with her penciled notes in the margins, little arrows and underlines, and the occasional "yes" written next to a passage she loved, boxed up and stacked on the front porch. I pushed my wheelchair out there and found Patrice positioning a decorative cabinet where the bookshelf had been. "Where are my wife's books, Patrice?" My voice was the quietest it had been all week. She did not look up from adjusting the cabinet's angle. "In those boxes, Dawn. They were just collecting dust." This space needed something with a little more visual interest. I pushed myself over to the nearest box and opened it. Ellie's copy of To Kill a Mockingbird was on top, face down the spine, cracked from the number of times she had read it. Her penciled "Yes, this is everything" was visible in the margin of page 284. I had read that note so many times I knew exactly where on the page it sat. I closed the box. I pushed myself back to my room. I closed the door, and for the first time since the morning after Ellie's funeral, I put my face in my hands and I cried. Not the quiet, controlled kind. The kind that comes from somewhere below your ribs and takes your whole body with it and leaves you wrung out and ashamed and strangely lighter all at once. When I came out an hour later, Frank was still at the kitchen table. He looked at my face and said nothing about it. He just refilled my coffee cup, pushed it across the table to me and said, "You eating that soup or what?" "Yeah," I said. My voice was still rough. "Yeah, I'm eating it." He nodded. We sat there in my kitchen with the burgundy curtains Patrice had chosen blocking out the afternoon light, and Frank drank his coffee and I drank mine, and neither of us said what we were both thinking. We did not need to. Some things you do not have to say out loud when the right person is sitting across the table from you. "You know where I am," Frank said when he got up to leave. "Day or night. You know where I am." "I know," I said. By the end of that first week, I understood something I had been trying not to understand. They were not here to take care of me, and whatever was coming next, I needed to be ready for it. Now I need to step away from my own story for a moment. I need to tell you about something that was happening across town while all of this was going on inside my house. Something I had absolutely no knowledge of at the time, but that I have since come to understand in considerable detail, because without it, the rest of what I am going to tell you makes no sense at all. 8 months before that night on the mountain, a detective named Naomi Reeves sat down at her desk in the Knox County Sheriff's Office and opened a case file on a man named Marcus Booker. I will tell you what I know about Naomi Reeves. She was 29 years old. She had been with Knox County for 6 years, the last 3, as a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit. She was by every account I have heard, since the kind of investigator who did not let things go, not because she was stubborn, but because she genuinely believed that the people on the other end of financial fraud were real people whose real lives were being taken apart, and that mattered to her personally in a way that went beyond the job description. Marcus Booker had come to her attention through a referral from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the branch of the federal tax agency that handles criminal tax fraud, not just civil penalties. Under federal law, criminal tax evasion carries up to 5 years in federal prison per count. The IRS had flagged a series of transactions through a small real estate investment company. Marcus operated transactions that moved money through multiple accounts in a pattern consistent with concealing income from federal reporting. They needed a local investigator to build the supporting case on the ground. Naomi got the file. She was thorough, 8 months thorough. She documented the shell accounts, the paper trails, the payments that went in as one thing and came out labeled as something else entirely. And she found something else, too, a name she had not expected to find. Patrice Booker, Marcus's mother. Her name was on 2 of the accounts, not as a passive signatory, as an active participant in the movement of funds. Patrice was not just standing by while her son committed fraud. She was holding one of the doors open. 4 years earlier, Marcus had been flagged in Nashville for something similar, a small investment scheme that had cost 12 people their savings. That case had gone nowhere because the evidence was circumstantial, and because Patrice had stepped in as a character witness and financial guarantor in a way that muddied the waters enough to close the file. He had learned from that. This time he was more careful, but not careful enough. Naomi had been building the case for 8 months when she opened a routine background check on Marcus's known associates and family members and pulled up the name of his wife, Cheryl Booker, born Cheryl Whitfield, father Donald Whitfield, Knoxville, Tennessee. She told me later that she sat looking at that name on her screen for a long time without moving, long enough that her coffee went cold. Her colleague Carter knocked on her open office door around 9 that evening, saw the expression on her face, and said, "Reeves, you look like somebody just told you your car got towed." "What's wrong?" "Carter." She said, "If you found out that a suspect's family member was someone who had changed the entire direction of your life, what would you do?" Carter leaned against the doorframe. He was a practical man, Carter. The kind who thought in straight lines. "Request a transfer off the case," he said without hesitation. Conflict of interest. You can't investigate someone objectively when you've got personal ties to their family. The defense would tear you apart on the stand. "That's what I thought," Naomi said. "You got a conflict of interest situation?" She looked back at the screen, at the name Donald Whitfield, at the address on Birchwood Lane, that she recognized the house with the covered porch and the oak tree in the backyard, and the 2 rocking chairs she had sat near once as a child, waiting for Mrs. Whitfield to come back from the kitchen with a glass of lemonade and a plate of crackers. "I'm going to request a transfer," she said. "Good call," Carter said, and left. She printed the transfer request form. She filled it out. She signed it and placed it on her supervisor's desk before she left the building that night. The next morning, it was still sitting there unsigned. Her supervisor was out sick. The deputy who covered for him said he would get to the backlog by end of week. End of week was 5 days away. And Marcus Booker was still her active case, so she did what she had been doing for 8 months. She drove to the east side of Knoxville, parked her car 2 blocks from a house on Birchwood Lane, and she watched. She watched Marcus come and go. She documented his movements, his meetings, his phone calls in public spaces. She did her job because it was still her job until someone told her it wasn't. She did not go to the door. She did not make contact. She told herself that as long as she kept her professional distance, as long as she did not let the personal knowledge she carried affect a single decision she made, in that case she was still on the right side of the line. She was still telling herself that 11 days later, when she watched Marcus Booker's car pull out of that driveway at 11:30 at night, and something about the way it moved, slow, deliberate, no headlights for the first half block, made every instinct she had go rigid. She followed. Let me come back to my side of things now. Because while Naomi Reeves was sitting in a parked car watching my house, I was inside it, figuring out something that should have taken me longer to figure out. It was day 8 after I came home from the hospital, a Tuesday morning. Cheryl and Marcus had driven into town together, something about a meeting. Marcus said very casually, the way he said most things, like everything he did was perfectly ordinary. I had nodded. I had waited until I heard his car reach the end of the street. Then I picked up my phone and tried to call Gerald Sims. Gerald had been my family's lawyer for 19 years. He had done our wills, handled the property transfer when we refinanced the house in 2009, and sat across from me at his desk the week after Ellie died, and helped me understand what I actually owned and what I needed to protect. He was a careful man, Gerald. The kind who read every line and then read it again. His number was not in my phone. I scrolled through the contacts twice. Gerald Sims. Not there. I tried Frank Delwood next, thinking I would ask Frank to look up the number. Frank was also gone from my contacts. So was my doctor's office. So was the number for the Veterans Affairs office I had called twice in the past year. I set the phone down on my knee and sat very still. They had gone through my phone, systematically. Removed the numbers of anyone who might help me act independently. It was not careless, it was careful, and it had been done sometime in that first week while I was sleeping, or in the shower, or sitting out on the back porch, looking at Ellie's empty garden. I thought about what that meant for a moment. Then I thought about what I was going to do about it. 15 minutes later, Frank Delwood appeared at my back door the way he did every few days, unannounced, carrying a thermos of coffee. I had never been so glad to see a canvas jacket in my life. Frank, I said before he could say anything, I need you to take me somewhere this morning. Right now, while they're gone. Frank looked at me. His eyes went to my expression and stayed there. He was a man who had known me for 22 years, and he could read the difference between Don Whitfield being cautious and Don Whitfield being serious. Where? He said. Gerald Sims's office. He did not ask why. He just set the thermos on the counter and said, "Let me pull the truck around." Gerald Sims had the kind of office that looked like a library, that had learned to practice law floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk the size of a dining table, reading glasses perpetually pushed up on his forehead. He stood up when Frank wheeled me in, and his expression shifted immediately into the focused, careful attention that had always made me trust him. "Don," he said, coming around the desk to shake my hand. "Sit down. Tell me everything." So I did. All of it. Marcus and Cheryl moving in, the furniture, Patrice and the books, the deleted numbers, the quiet, systematic way they had been moving through my life, like they were already cataloging what was theirs. Gerald listened without interrupting. He made notes on a yellow legal pad in his small, precise handwriting. When I finished, he took his glasses off, cleaned them with the corner of his shirt, put them back on, and pulled a folder from his filing cabinet. "I want to show you something," he said. He laid a document on the desk in front of me. "This came across my desk last week, through a colleague who handles tax filings. It's a power of attorney document filed with the state authorizing Marcus Booker to act on your behalf in financial matters." "Don, did you sign this?" I looked at the signature line. My name was there, my handwriting, except I had never signed that document in my life. The room went very quiet around the edges. No, I said, I did not sign that." Gerald nodded slowly like he had expected the answer, and was not surprised but was sorry anyway. In Tennessee, forging a signature on a legal document is a Class D felony. It carries 2 to 4 years. He folded his hands on the desk. But before we talk about that, I want to do something today, right now, while you're sitting in this chair. I want to file a revocation of power of attorney. That is a legal document that cancels any and all authorizations Marcus Booker may have obtained, signed or otherwise, to act on your behalf. Once it's filed and notarized, anything he tries to do with your property or your accounts using your name has no legal standing whatsoever. How long does it take? I asked. About 45 minutes, Gerald said. And I have 2 witnesses in the next room. I looked at Frank. Frank had his arms crossed and his chin up, and the expression of a man who has just watched someone try to cheat his oldest friend and is approximately 1 degree away from saying something extremely direct about it. Let's do it, I said. 45 minutes later, I rode back to Birchwood Lane in Frank's truck with a signed, notarized, legally filed document that meant every piece of paper Marcus Booker had been preparing was now worth exactly nothing. He did not know that yet. I did not plan to tell him. The night before Marcus made his move, I could not sleep. Not because of the hip, though it was complaining the way it always did in cold weather. A deep, grinding ache that the pain medication took the edge off, but never fully erased. I could not sleep because the house had a feeling to it. Something beneath the ordinary sounds, the furnace cycling on the wind off the mountains, pressing against the windows. Something underneath all of that felt like held breath, like the whole place was waiting. I lay in the dark and thought about the revocation document Gerald had filed 3 days ago. It was done. It was legal. It was airtight. Whatever Marcus was planning to do with my property, he could not do it. Not with my name on it, not with any document he produced, not with anything. I told myself that several times. Then I lay there and listened to the house breathe. In the room down the hall, I could hear Cheryl moving, restless. The creak of bed springs, the soft pad of feet across the floor. Then nothing for a while. Then the springs again. I knew that sound. I had heard it when she was 8 years old, and something was worrying her. A test the next day, a fight with a friend, the particular 2 a.m. anxieties of childhood. I used to get up and stand outside her door just to listen, just to make sure she settled. I never had to knock. She always settled. She was not settling now. Marcus's voice came through the wall. Low. 2 words, maybe 3. I could not make out what he said, but I heard the way Cheryl's movement stopped immediately after. Complete stillness. The kind that comes from being told to stop, not from deciding to. I closed my eyes and breathed. The next morning, Marcus came to the kitchen while I was at the table with my coffee. He was dressed for the day-pressed shirt, the kind of casual that costs money, and he was carrying a manila folder. He sat down across from me and put the folder on the table between us with the deliberate casualness of someone who had rehearsed the gesture. Dawn, he said, I want to talk to you about something, just the 2 of us. Cheryl's not here, I asked. She's getting ready. He opened the folder. Inside was a document several pages dense with the kind of language that is designed to sound official and mean as little as possible to anyone who has not spent years reading it. This is a property transfer agreement, standard document. What it does is add Cheryl and me to the deed of the house as co-owners. It protects everyone. If something happens to you, there is no probate, no delay. The house transfers directly without the courts involved. I looked at the document. I did not touch it. Whose names are on the deed right now? I asked. Well, yours And whose names would be on it after I sign this? He held my gaze. Yours, mine, and Cheryl's. And if I pass away, it would pass to us, yes. But Don, that is what you want. You want Cheryl taken care of. Get these out of my house. I said it quietly. No raised voice. No heat. Just the flat, final weight of a man who has made up his mind and has nothing left to prove about it. Marcus's composure cracked for exactly 1 second. A muscle in his jaw jumped. His hands went still on the folder. Then the smile came back, but it was thinner now, stretched over something that was not friendliness anymore. Don, he said, I think you should take that folder and leave this table. I picked up my coffee cup. I'm going to finish my breakfast now. I looked toward the doorway. Cheryl was standing there. She had come in quietly. I did not know how long she had been there. She was in her work clothes, hair done ready for the day she had claimed to be getting ready for. I looked at my daughter. I looked at her the way a father looks at his child when he is asking without words for the truth. Her face was careful, arranged. She held my eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then she looked down at the counter and picked up her phone. Cheryl, I said. She did not look up. I sat with that for a moment. The coffee in my cup was still hot. Outside the kitchen window, a cardinal landed on the fence post in the backyard, a sharp red against the gray November morning, and then flew away again. Marcus closed the folder. His voice when it came was the smoothest it had ever been. Don, he said, there is a place about 40 minutes east of here, a care facility, very well regarded, clean, good staff, good food. Cheryl and I have already spoken with the admissions office. He let that land. We put your name on their waiting list 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, before the documents, before the conversation, before any of this had been said out loud between us. When did you do that? I asked. He did not answer. He just looked at me with the patient, settled expression of a man who believes the outcome is already decided and is simply waiting for the other person to understand it. I finished my coffee. I set the cup down carefully. I excused myself and pushed my wheelchair back to my room, and I sat there in the quiet for a long time, looking at the framed photograph of Ellie on my nightstand, the one from our 25th anniversary, the one where she was laughing at something I had said, and her whole face was in it, and I thought about what I needed to do. That night, I heard them decide. They waited until 11:47. I know the exact time because I was awake, lying in the dark with my eyes open and my hearing tuned to every movement in that house, and I watched the red numbers on the bedside clock move from 11:46 to 11:47 when I heard Marcus's door open. He was careful about it. Quiet. The kind of quiet that takes effort, the kind that tells you the person making it has thought about what sounds to avoid and in what order. The floorboard outside the hallway bathroom, he stepped over it. The kitchen light, he did not turn it on. He moved through that house in the dark like he already knew every inch of it, and I suppose by then he did. Cheryl came to my door. She knocked twice, soft, almost apologetic, and opened it without waiting. Dad. Her voice was low. We need to go. It's midnight, Cheryl. I know. There's a check-in process at the facility. They asked us to come after hours, so it's less disruptive for the other residents. She was already moving to the corner where my wheelchair sat folded. She shook it open with the practiced motion of someone who had done it before. Marcus has the car running. I looked at my daughter in the half-dark of that room, at the set of her jaw, at the careful blankness she had arranged over her face like a coat she had put on specifically for this night. Cheryl, I said, look at me. She looked at me. For one moment, one single moment, something moved across her face. Something that looked just briefly like the 8-year-old girl who used to stand at the window watching for my truck to come home. Her chin tightened. Her throat moved. Then she looked away and brought the wheelchair to the bedside. I transferred into it. What else was I going to do? I was 72 years old, 3 weeks out from a hip replacement, and my daughter was standing in my room with the wheelchair open and her husband's car running in the driveway. I got into the chair because sometimes in life, you recognize the moment when fighting openly will cost you more than it will gain you, and you store what you know and you wait. I looked at my room as she pushed me out. The photograph of Ellie on the nightstand. The hinge on the closet door I had been meaning to tighten for 2 years and never got to. The curtains Ellie had hemmed herself when we first moved in. I looked at the living room, the wall where her pictures had been before Patrice moved them, the bookshelf that was not a bookshelf anymore, the window with the burgundy curtains that were not Ellie's. I looked at the front door as it closed behind me. Outside, the cold hit me immediately. A deep, still November cold, with no wind, the kind that does not move but simply is pressing in from every direction. The neighborhood was entirely dark. Every house on the street with lights off, curtains drawn. Across the yard, Frank Delwood's windows were dark, too. Marcus opened the rear passenger door. He did not touch me. He stood back while Cheryl helped me and folded the wheelchair into the trunk, and then they both got in the front, and Marcus pulled out of the driveway with the headlights off for the first half block. Nobody spoke. The heater came on and the radio came on. Marcus reached over and turned the radio off. The only sound was the road under the tires and the particular silence of a car containing 3 people who have nothing left that can be said between them. East of Knoxville, the streets give way to roads, and the roads narrow and the hills begin. I watched the lights of the city fall away behind us. I watched the sky get darker as we moved into the hills. Fewer streetlights, then none, just the white beams of the headlights and the shapes of bare trees on either side. Marcus drove for about 20 minutes. Then he slowed. Then he stopped. There was nothing around us. A 2-lane road cut into the side of a hill, no houses, no lights, no other traffic. On one side of the road, the hill rose steeply. On the other, it dropped away into dark. He turned the car off. In the sudden silence, I heard Cheryl exhale. "Get out," Marcus said. He did not turn around. "I beg your pardon." He turned around then, and his face in the faint, ambient light of a clouded night sky was the face of a man who has taken off something he had been wearing for a long time and is not going to put it back on. He said things to me then that I am going to paraphrase because some words do not belong in decent company. He said I had been a dead weight on Cheryl's life for years. He said the house was going to be theirs one way or another, and the only variable had been how long I was going to make it take. He said that a man who could not walk across his own kitchen without a rolling chair was not a man who needed a house. He was a man who needed to be somewhere people were paid to manage him. And then he said that Eleanor dying when she did was probably a mercy, because at least she did not have to watch what I had become. I felt that one go in. I will not pretend otherwise. He got out of the car. He came around to my door. He opened it and reached in, and his hands on my arms were not rough exactly, not the way you might expect. They were businesslike, efficient, like moving furniture. He got me out. He stood me against the side of the car for a moment. He went to the trunk and took out the wheelchair, and then he threw it. Not folded neatly on the ground. He threw it one-handed off the edge of the road. I heard it hit something in the dark, below a crack, a clatter, and then nothing. Cheryl had gotten out of the passenger side. She stood in the road, arms wrapped around herself, looking at a point somewhere past my left shoulder. "Cheryl," I said. She did not look at me. Marcus walked past me, got back in the driver's seat, and started the engine. My daughter took one step back toward the car. Then she stopped. I watched her look at me, one full direct look, and in it I saw 100 things that I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand. Then she got in the car, and she closed the door, and the headlights came on, and Marcus made a 3-point turn on that narrow road and drove back the direction they had come. I watched the taillights until they disappeared around a curve. My phone was not in my pocket. I had left it on the nightstand. When Cheryl came to my room, I had not thought to take it, because I had not known not fully what that car ride was going to be. And even if I had brought it, I would have looked at that dark mountain road and known the signal out here was worth nothing at all. Then I was alone. Before I reveal who found me on that road, drop a 1 in the comments. Just a 1. So I know you are still with me, because this next part is the part that changed everything. Quick note, some elements here are fictional crafted to carry the message forward. If you would prefer to stop here, that is completely okay. The first thing I did was take inventory. Again, same process as when I hit the ground the first time, methodical, no panic start at the top and work down. Head clear. Shoulders scraped but functional. Left hip screaming, but screaming means nerves still working, which is better than the alternative. Hands bleeding at the palms from the asphalt. Overall assessment alive cold and in a situation that was going to get considerably worse before it got better. The wheelchair was gone. I had heard it hit something in the dark below the road and then go quiet, and I was not going to be retrieving it. Which meant my options were drag myself along the road surface and hope for a passing vehicle, or stay exactly where I was and hope for the same thing except horizontal and therefore easier to miss. I chose to drag. It is not a dignified thing pulling yourself along a road with your elbows and one good leg at 11-something at night. I want to be honest about that. There was nothing heroic about it. It was just a 72-year-old man in a thin shirt on cold asphalt, moving about 6 inches at a time, getting road rash on both forearms through the fabric, telling himself that the next 6 inches was the important one, and not to think about anything beyond that. I thought about Ellie anyway. I always think about Ellie. Not the grief of her, the steadiness, the particular way she had of being certain that things would work out, not naive certainty. Not the kind that ignores the evidence, but the kind that has looked at the evidence and decided that falling apart is not a useful response to it. She was the most practically optimistic person I ever knew. She cried when things were hard, and then she washed her face and figured out the next step. "Figure out the next step, Walt," I said out loud. My voice sounded thin in all that dark and quiet. 6 more inches. 6 more inches. I had been moving for what felt like 10 minutes when I saw the headlights. They came around the upper curve of the mountain road slowly, carefully, the way a person drives when they know a road well enough to respect its edges in the dark. Not fast, not aggressive. The lights swept across the tree line and then found the road surface. And then, as the vehicle came around the bend and straightened out, they found me. I got my right arm up over my head. I waved it. A 72-year-old man lying half on the road's shoulder, waving one arm at an oncoming car in the middle of nowhere at midnight. Which is exactly the kind of thing that makes most people accelerate and look straight ahead. The car slowed down. It stopped. A door opened, and someone got out fast. Not the careful, curious movement of a person who is not sure what they are looking at, but the quick, decisive movement of someone who has already assessed the situation and is already responding to it. Running footsteps on the asphalt. "Sir." A woman's voice, low and focused and completely steady. She was crouching beside me before I fully registered She was there, one hand on my shoulder, the other checking the road surface around me. "Sir, can you hear me? Are you? Can you tell me where the pain is?" "Hip," I said. "Left hip. I had a replacement 3 weeks ago." "Okay." Her hands were already moving, checking my head, my neck, my shoulder. "I'm going to help you sit up. Don't push with the left side. Let me take the weight. Ready." She was strong for someone her size, and she was skilled about it. Not pulling, supporting, letting me direct the movement, and absorbing the load where I needed her to. In about 30 seconds, I was sitting upright on the road with her crouched beside me. And that was when the car's headlights caught her face directly. I knew in that particular way you know things that you were not expecting, to know that I had seen that face before. Not recently, a long time ago. The angle of the jaw, the set of the eyes. Something about the way she held herself, even crouching, straight-backed, alert, completely present. "Who are you?" I said. She looked at me, and I watched something move across her expression, something complicated and unguarded and completely unplanned. "My name is Naomi Reeves," she said. "I'm a detective with Knox County Sheriff's Office." She paused for just a moment, the pause of a person deciding how much to say and deciding to say all of it. "And a long time ago, your wife was my third-grade teacher. She brought me home for dinner one rainy afternoon when I was 8 years old, and I sat at your kitchen table, and she gave me lemonade and a grilled cheese sandwich, and I thought that house was the most beautiful place I had ever been." Her voice stayed level through all of it, but her jaw was tight and her eyes were bright. "I have known who you were since the night I pulled your name from a case file 2 weeks ago. I filed a transfer request because I knew I couldn't be objective about this case. The request wasn't approved before tonight." I stared at her. My brain was doing several things simultaneously, processing pain, processing cold, processing what she had just said, and for a moment, none of them connected properly. "The little girl," I said. "Ellie's girl." "Yes, sir." Her voice cracked slightly on the second word. Just slightly. She pulled it back immediately. "Mr. Whitfield, I need to tell you something. I was parked on this road tonight as part of an active investigation into Marcus Booker. I witnessed what just happened. Everything. I've already called it in." She held my gaze. "Under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-15-507, what Marcus Booker did tonight, abandoning a vulnerable adult in a dangerous situation, is a criminal offense. Aggravated neglect of an elderly person. That is a Class C felony in this state. I am a witness. You are the victim, and I have it documented." She let that land. Then she said quietly, "I am going to take you home now. Your house. Tonight. Is that what you want?" I looked at this woman, this stranger who was not a stranger, this child of Ellie's, who had grown up while I was not watching, who had become someone while I was mailing checks and not knowing her face, and something in my chest that had been clenched tight for 3 weeks, released all at once, with an almost physical sensation, like a fist opening. "Yes," I said. "That is exactly what I want." She got her shoulder under my arm, and she got me to her car. She was not gentle the way people are gentle when they think you are fragile. She was careful the way people are careful when they respect that you are hurting and want to help you through it with your dignity intact. There is a difference, and it matters enormously. She got me into the passenger seat. She turned the heat all the way up. She pulled a jacket from the back seat and put it over my shoulders without asking if I wanted it, which is the right call when someone is shaking. Then she took out her phone and made a call. "Kürter," she said when it connected. It's Reeves. I need you to wake up. I've got a situation. A pause. No, I'm fine. Listen, I am officially recusing myself from the Booker case as of right now and transferring full investigative authority to you effective immediately. I am a witness in an incident that occurred tonight involving the subject's father-in-law. Another pause. I know. I'll explain everything when I get there. But Carter, start the paperwork. Tonight. We're going to need a warrant. She ended the call and set the phone in the cup holder and pulled onto the road and drove. She did not ask me for directions. She already knew the way. She pulled into my driveway at 12:31 in the morning, and I know that because the clock on her dashboard was the first thing I looked at when the car stopped, some automatic part of my brain still keeping track of time the way it had been doing all night. Frank Delwood's lights were off. Every house on the street was dark. From the outside, my house looked like nothing had changed. Porch light on curtains drawn the quiet face it had always shown the neighborhood. From the outside, you would not know anything about what had happened inside it. Naomi came around to my door before I could attempt getting out on my own, and she helped me up the porch steps and through the front door in the same careful, efficient way she had gotten me off the road. When we got inside and she reached for the wall switch and the lights came on in the entryway, we both stopped. The wall where Ellie's photographs had been was bare. Every single one. The hooks were still there, small brass hooks I had put in myself years ago, measured and leveled twice, because Ellie said she wanted them exactly right, but the frames were gone. The bookshelf was still empty. The decorative cabinet Patrice had put in its place, sitting there with a small succulent on top that someone had brought from somewhere that was not this house. The curtains in the living room were Patrice's burgundy curtains, not Ellie's. They had stripped her out of every visible surface. Where are the pictures? Naomi asked, her voice careful. I don't know, I said. Boxes somewhere. The garage, maybe. They've been moving things since the day I came home. Something crossed her face. Then not anger exactly, but something harder and more purposeful than sadness. Sit down, she said. I'll make coffee. She found the coffee without asking me where it was. It was where Ellie had always kept it, above the second burner on the left. And while the machine ran, she pulled out her phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Carter, a quick, detailed account of what she had witnessed, the documentation she had already created, what she needed him to initiate. The second was to a number I did not recognize, and she spoke in a low voice for about 4 minutes, and then came back to the table. Gerald Sims, I said. That was Gerald Sims. She looked slightly surprised. You know his number. I know his voice, I said. He has been my lawyer for 19 years. He sounds like a man who is always slightly more awake than you expect him to be. That got the smallest smile out of her, quick, involuntary, the kind that happens before a person can decide whether the moment is appropriate for it. Then she sat down across from me and wrapped both hands around her mug the way Ellie used to, and for a moment, the similarity of the gesture hit me somewhere. I was not prepared for it, and I had to look at the table. I need to tell you something, she said, about the case. What I'm about to tell you is information you're going to need, and you deserve to hear it directly from me rather than find out piece by piece later. She told me about Marcus. 8 months of documentation. The shell accounts, the fraudulent income reporting the coordinated movement of funds through accounts registered in Patrice's name. The Nashville case 4 years ago and how Patrice had helped him walk away from it. The IRS involvement, the coordination with federal investigators, the weight of evidence that had been accumulating since March. I listened to all of it. I listened the way you listen when you are finding out that the thing you suspected was worse than you suspected. And the confirmation does not feel like relief, it feels like the floor you were already standing on, confirming that it is in fact solid. You knew. You just now have proof that you knew correctly. How long would he have gotten away with it? I asked when she finished. Without tonight. She considered it. Another few months, maybe. The warrant application was almost ready, but tonight accelerated everything. She looked at me directly. What he did on that road is a Class C felony, Mr. Whitfield. 2 to 10 years. Combined with the financial charges, federal tax evasion carries up to 5 years per count, and we have multiple counts. Marcus Booker is looking at significant prison time. And Patrice, her accounts were used as instruments of the fraud. She knew. She participated. She will be charged. Naomi's voice was steady and factual and certain. She is not going to walk away from this. I nodded slowly. Outside, the neighborhood was completely quiet. There is something else, I said. I pushed back from the table and wheeled to Ellie's desk in the corner of the room, the small writing desk she had used for 30 years to grade papers and write letters and pay bills. I opened the second drawer on the left. The envelope was still there, sitting exactly where I had placed it after the funeral, undisturbed among Ellie's things that Patrice apparently had not gotten to yet. I took it out and held it for a moment. Then I brought it back to the table and set it in front of Naomi. Ellie wrote that, I said. After you left Knoxville for college. She wanted to send it to you and she did not have an address. Naomi looked at the envelope. She picked it up slowly, the way you pick up something that you understand is fragile, not because of what it is made of, but because of what it means. She unfolded the single sheet inside. I watched her read it. I watched her lips press together. I watched her blink twice rapidly, then go very still. Her hand holding the letter developed the slightest tremor, barely just enough to see if you were looking for it. She never forgot me, she said. Her voice had gone quiet and rough at the same time. She talked about you right up until she could not talk anymore, I said. She was proud of you. She would have been so proud of who you became. Naomi set the letter down very carefully on the table flat, smoothing one corner with her thumb. She looked at it for another moment. Then she stood up and said with a briskness that I understood was the only way she was going to get through the next few minutes without coming fully apart. Help me find the pictures. We should put them back before anyone comes. We found 4 boxes in the hall closet. Patrice had not moved them to the garage yet. Naomi lifted each frame out carefully and brought them to me one at a time, and I told her where each one went, and she put them back exactly right. The anniversary photograph above the fireplace. The one of Ellie with her 3rd grade class from 2001. The wedding picture that had hung in this house since 1979. She was reaching up to hang the last one, Ellie and me at the kitchen table. Christmas morning, 1994, Cheryl between us, all 3 of us laughing about something the camera had caught us in the middle of when we heard the sound of Frank Delwood's back gate. Frank Delwood came through the back door the way he always came through back doors, without knocking, without announcing himself, the way a man enters a place he has been welcome for 22 years and knows it. He stopped in the kitchen doorway and took in the room. I was at the table. Naomi standing near the wall with a framed photograph in her hands, the last one, the Christmas one. The coffee pot still warm. The bare hooks on the wall now holding pictures, again Ellie's pictures, all of them back in their places. I saw your lights on, Frank said. He was in his canvas jacket and his work boots, and his reading glasses were pushed up on his forehead, which meant he had been awake and trying to read and not managing it. He looked at me. Then he looked at Naomi. Then he looked at the pictures on the wall, and his jaw did that thing it did. Tightened, released, tightened again. Dawn, he said. You want to tell me what happened tonight? Sit down, Frank, I said. It's a long story. I got time, I told him. All of it, the midnight drive, the road, the wheelchair thrown into the dark. Naomi finding me. While I talked, Frank sat with his elbows on the table, and his hands folded together, and his eyes on me, and his expression went through several phases that a person who did not know him might have mistaken for calm. I knew Frank Delwood. That was not calm. That was a man choosing very deliberately not to say out loud what he was thinking. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I've got something. He reached into the chest pocket of his canvas jacket and pulled out his phone. He navigated to his photos and turned the screen toward us. I couldn't sleep, he said. I was on the porch around 11:30. I saw Marcus's car pull out with the headlights off and something about it. He shook his head. I don't know. Something felt wrong. So I filmed it. The video was 43 seconds long, clear enough in the ambient light of the street lamp on the corner to show Marcus's car. The make, the color, the license plate pulling out of my driveway with no headlights for the first half block. The timestamp was 11:46 p.m. Naomi looked at it twice. Then she looked at Frank. I'm going to need you to send that to me right now, she said. And I'm going to need a written statement from you about what you observed tonight. You'll have both, Frank said without a moment's hesitation. That video combined with my own witness account is going to make what happened tonight very difficult to argue against in court, Naomi said. She was looking at her phone, already typing something. Digital timestamp corroborating visual evidence, 2 independent witnesses. The DA's office is going to be very happy to see this. Frank sent her the video. Then he looked at me across the table with the expression of a man who has just understood the full weight of what his neighbor has been living through, and his eyes were bright in a way I had not seen from Frank Delwood in the 22 years I had known him. You should have told me sooner, he said. I know, I said. I would have. I know Frank. He pressed his lips together and looked at the table. Then he looked up. Well, he said. I'm here now. We sat in that kitchen, the 3 of us, and waited. Naomi had her phone out and was coordinating with Carter in low, efficient exchanges that I could follow well enough to understand that things were moving. Deputies were being dispatched. A warrant had been expedited through an on-call magistrate in Tennessee. A magistrate can authorize an arrest warrant outside of regular court hours in urgent situations involving violent or serious felonies, and what Marcus had done tonight qualified on multiple counts. Carter had everything Naomi had been building for 8 months plus tonight's incident report, and he was moving fast. I was not anxious sitting there. I want to be clear about that. I was tired, and my hip was aching deeply in the way it ached when it had been through too much in one night, and there was a cut on my left palm that Naomi had cleaned and bandaged with the first aid kit from under my bathroom sink. But I was not anxious. I was the calmest I had been in 3 weeks. I think it was the pictures. Having Ellie's pictures back on the wall. At 1:47 in the morning, we heard a car pull into the driveway. Then 30 seconds later, a second car. The headlights swept across the living room curtains. Frank stood up. Naomi put her phone in her pocket and straightened her jacket. I stayed in my chair. We heard car doors. 2 sets of footsteps on the porch, the particular sound of people walking without urgency, people who believe they are walking toward something ordinary. The front door handle turned. Marcus came in first. He was still in the clothes he had left the house in. He looked relaxed, the slightly loose, well-fed look of a man who has eaten a good meal and accomplished what he set out to do. He had his keys in his hand, and he was already reaching toward the side table where he had been leaving his keys for 2 weeks. He saw me. The keys stopped moving. His hand just stopped, suspended in the air for 1 full second, while his brain processed what his eyes were telling it, which was that the man he had left on a mountain road 2 hours ago was sitting in his own living room under full light, with a cup of coffee on the table beside him and 2 other people standing nearby. Cheryl came in behind him and walked directly into his back because he had stopped without warning. She stepped around him. She saw me. The color left her face the way water leaves a glass that has been knocked over completely immediately, all at once. Her hand went to her mouth. Marcus recovered first. That was who he was, a man whose instincts ran toward recovery rather than honesty, toward spin rather than truth. He crossed the room toward me with his arms slightly open, the posture of someone approaching a reconciliation. "Don," he said, and his voice was warm and urgent and completely manufactured. "Oh my God, Don. We came back for you. We felt terrible. We turned around. We were on our way back. Marcus." I said his name the way you say a word when you want to end a conversation, not start one. "Stop talking." He stopped. "Sit down," I said. "Both of you." Neither of them sat. Marcus stayed standing with his arms still slightly open, a man caught mid-performance. Cheryl had not moved from just inside the doorway. She was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something raw and unguarded and frightened that made her look for just one moment like the child she used to be. "Dad," she said. "Cheryl." My voice was not hard. It was not angry. It was just final, the way a door sounds when it closes on a latch. "I need you to listen to me. What happened tonight on that road, there is a detective present who witnessed all of it. There is video documentation of you leaving this driveway at 11:46 without headlights. There are 2 independent witnesses and an active warrant process." I looked at my son-in-law directly. "You left me on the side of a mountain, Marcus. That is not a family disagreement. That is a crime. And you are not going to talk your way out of it." Marcus's mouth opened, closed. For the first time since I had known him, the smooth machinery of his composure was simply not running. I watched him reach for the words he always had, and find for once that they were not there. And then someone knocked on the front door. Deputy Ron Calloway was broad-shouldered, late 40s, Knox County uniform, the patient, unhurried manner of a man who had seen enough human behavior to stop being surprised by any of it. He came through the front door with a second deputy behind him, nodded to Naomi the way officers nod to each other when they are on the same side, and looked around the room with calm, cataloging attention. "Detective Reeves." "Deputy Calloway, thank you for coming out. Wouldn't miss it." He looked at Marcus. Marcus Booker. Marcus had his back against the fireplace. He had been retreating in small, barely perceptible steps since my last words, the unconscious movement of a man whose body understood what his mind was still refusing to accept. His car keys were clenched so tightly I could see the tendons in his hand from across the room. "I want to talk to a lawyer," Marcus said. "That's your right," Deputy Calloway said pleasantly. "But first, Marcus Booker, you are under arrest for aggravated neglect of an elderly person, Class C felony under Tennessee state law. We also have a federal detainer on file connected to an ongoing IRS criminal investigation matter. You'll be seeing additional paperwork on that within 24 hours. A federal detainer meant that even if Marcus somehow made bail on the state charges, federal authorities could hold him while the tax fraud case was built. He was not walking out of any courthouse and disappearing. Carter had moved fast. The car keys fell from Marcus's hand and hit the hardwood floor. The sound was very loud in that room. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, his voice stripped of its usual confidence, the way paint strips from weathered wood. "Don fell on his own. We were trying to help." "Marcus." Deputy Calloway said his name with the same quiet finality I had used. "I have a witness statement from Detective Reeves and a video recording with a timestamp. We are past the misunderstanding stage." Marcus kept talking. He was still explaining, still offering alternative narratives, still delivering words with the confidence of a man who had always believed the right words could reshape any situation right up until the handcuffs clicked and the door closed behind him. The room went quiet. I looked at Cheryl. She was standing near the entryway table holding Gerald's folder. Gerald had arrived, while Deputy Calloway was dealing with Marcus and handed her the paperwork with the quiet efficiency of a man doing something long overdue. Revocation of power of attorney. New will. Forged signature documentation. Notice of removal from all accounts and estate instruments effective immediately. She was staring at the folder without opening it. "Cheryl," I said. She looked up. Eyes red and wet mascara down both cheeks. She looked nothing like the woman who had stood on a mountain road 2 hours ago with her arms crossed and her face arranged into careful blankness. She looked devastated. She looked young. "Dad!" Her voice broke completely. "Dad, I didn't think he was actually going to..." "Cheryl." I kept my voice gentle. "Don't finish that sentence. There is no ending to it that I can believe right now." Her face crumpled. The tears came not controlled, not performed, but the ugly, uncontrolled kind that comes from somewhere real. Her shoulders shook. She pressed the folder against her chest, like it was the only solid thing in the room. "I love you," I said. "You are my daughter, and I will always love you. Nothing that happened tonight changes that." I waited until she looked at me, until she actually saw me. But I cannot pretend tonight did not happen. I will not do that. Whatever you decide to do with the rest of your life, I hope you find your way to something better than this. But I cannot be part of it. Not anymore. Outside, I heard Deputy Calloway's cruiser pull out of my driveway. Gerald stepped forward and took the folder gently from Cheryl's hands. "Everything has been properly filed. Nothing can be contested. The house is Don's, and it will remain Don's." He said it quietly. "I think it would be best if you collected your things and found somewhere else to stay tonight." Cheryl stood there a moment longer. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand, the same automatic gesture she had used as a child, after crying so unguarded and familiar that my heart did something complicated I do not have a better word for than love. The kind that does not stop just because it should. She walked to the back bedroom. 20 minutes later, she came out with a bag on her shoulder and did not look at anyone on her way to the door. At the threshold, she stopped, turned around, looked at me one last time. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Then the door clicked shut, and she was gone. Frank reached over and put his hand on my arm. He did not say anything. He just kept it there. "She's going to be all right," I said. I did not know if I believed it. But some things need to be said out loud before they have any chance of becoming true. I did not sleep that night. Not after Cheryl left. Not after Frank went home at 3. Not after Naomi said goodnight at the door and meant it in a way that settled somewhere solid. I lay in the dark and listened to the house, my house with Ellie's pictures back on the walls, and waited for morning. At 6:15, I gave up and made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table and watched the November light come in slow through the east window. The vegetable garden was visible from where I sat, bare earth, Ellie's tomato stakes still in the ground, waiting for a spring neither of us would be planting together. I thought about what Ellie would have said. I could hear it exactly. "Okay, Walt. What's the next step?" So I thought about the next step. Gerald Sims picked up on the second ring at 7:45. "Don," he said immediately. "I was going to call you at 8. How are you?" "Functional," I said. "I need to see you this morning." 9:30, he said. "I'll make room." Frank drove me without being asked. He dropped me at Gerald's building and said he would be in the lot. We did not talk much on the way, which was exactly right. Gerald came around the desk to shake my hand, with both of his, the most demonstrative greeting I had seen from him in 19 years. That told me something. "Sit down," he said. "Let me tell you where we stand." He had been on the phone since 6 a.m. The revocation of power of attorney was holding cleanly every financial authorization Marcus had obtained in my name was legally void. The forged signature on the tax filing had been documented and turned over to the IRS Criminal Investigation Team. "What about the house?" I said. "Yours," Gerald said without hesitation. "The deed has only your name. The revocation was filed before he presented any papers to you. Anything he submitted after that date is fraudulent on its face. Cleanly and completely yours." He slid the updated will across the desk. "Properly executed the night before 2 witnesses notarized filed with the county that morning. Cheryl removed from all accounts and estate instruments. Marcus has a public defender for arraignment this morning," Gerald continued. "The DA is not offering anything generous. Aggravated neglect Class C felony carries 2 to 10 years. Federal tax charges add more on top. He is going to be in this for a long time." He paused. "Patrice will be charged. Her involvement is documented clearly enough that she cannot claim ignorance. She will not walk away from this." I sat with that. Outside Gerald's window, Knoxville was going about its Tuesday morning traffic on Gay Street, a dog walker on the sidewalk, a delivery truck double parked outside the coffee shop. Ordinary things. The world running exactly as it always had. "What happens now?" I said. "Practically," Gerald folded his hands on the desk. "You go home, finish your recovery, do your physical therapy, live in your house." He said it the way a doctor states a diagnosis that is also a prescription. Then he said my name with the weight of a man who has something to say outside his professional scope. "You are going to be all right, Don. Not because of the documents, because of the kind of man you are. Eleanor knew that. And the young woman who drove you home last night knows it too." I did not say anything to that. But something that had been held tight in my chest for a very long time loosened just a little further. Frank was in the lot with the engine running and a coffee from the corner place ready when I came out. "Good," he said. "Good," I said. We drove back to Birchwood Lane. I sat on the porch for a while in the cold December air, the 2 rocking chairs, the bare garden, the quiet that comes after something large has finally finished moving through. Naomi stopped by that afternoon. Marcus had been remanded without bail. State charge combined with the federal detainer meant he was not going anywhere. She said it simply the way she said most things, and then she sat on the porch steps for a while, and we watched the light change over the yard and did not need to fill the time with words. Frank came later with a casserole Margaret had made. We ate at the kitchen table. He read the sports section. I looked out the window at Ellie's tomato stakes in the bare ground. Neither of us felt the need to say much. That was the best possible kind of company. 3 days later, Frank knocked on the back door with an expression I had not seen on his face before. He held out a small card without saying a word and watched my face while I read it. Cream-colored, embossed letters, an invitation. The card read, "Please join us for a housewarming celebration at our new Knoxville home." Below that was my address, my house, their party. I read it twice, set it down, looked at Frank. Frank had his arms crossed and his jaw set in the way that meant he had already decided what he thought, and was waiting to see what I decided. "Postmarks from last week," he said. "Before everything happened. He mailed these before that night on the mountain." I understood. Marcus had been so certain the house was already his, so completely convinced that he had sent invitations in advance, the way you celebrate a thing that is already settled. He had not known about Gerald. He had not known about the revocation. He had not known about Naomi parked 200 meters behind him on that mountain road. He had planned a party for a house he believed he had already taken. "Near as I can tell, half the street got one," Frank said. "Margaret, the Hendersons, Donna from across the road." He paused. "Don people accepted this. They're going to show up Saturday, thinking it's a housewarming." I looked at the card for a long moment. "Let them come," I said. Frank's eyebrows moved approximately half an inch for Frank Delwood. That was the equivalent of another man's jaw dropping. "Don, let them come. Don't cancel. Don't warn anyone. Let whoever is hosting walk into that room and announce the house is theirs." I set the card down with a small final motion. "And then I'll walk in." A slow smile moved across Frank's face, not amused, but the kind that recognizes something exactly right. "I'll call Gerald," he said. The next days moved with purposeful quiet. Naomi confirmed with Carter that the arrest warrants for Marcus and Patrice were signed and ready. The state charges were solid. The federal detainer was in place. Everything had been building for 8 months. Saturday would simply be the last page. Day of the party, Naomi arrived at 4 with paint on her jacket sleeve. Frank came 20 minutes later with a thermos. Gerald came at 5 with a folder. Naomi and Frank went through the house while I directed from my chair. Patrice's burgundy curtains came down. Ellie's blue-flowered ones went back up. They had been in the basement, undiscovered. Patrice's decorative cabinet came out of the living room. Ellie's bookshelf went back and books returned to their shelves in the order Ellie had kept them, genre by genre, alphabetical within. After a while, they stopped asking where things went. They figured it out from the dust outlines, the shapes Ellie's things had left behind in the places they had always lived. At 6:30, the first cars arrived. I watched through the front window, neighbors, familiar faces, people coming up the walk, the way people arrive at parties, expectant and a little festive. Music played through the smart speaker Marcus had installed. Generic, pleasant nothing Ellie would have chosen. At 7:15, the woman managing the event came into the living room, called for attention, and began speaking about Marcus and Cheryl and their beautiful new home. She raised her glass. I pushed open the front door. The wheelchair came through first, then me, thinning white hair, flannel shirt, 72 years old, and not finished yet. The room went very quiet. I looked at Ellie's pictures on the walls, her curtains on the windows, her bookshelf against the wall, the 2 rocking chairs on the porch, visible through the back window, exactly where they had always been. Then I looked at the woman with the raised glass. "This is my wife's home," I said, "and it's going to stay that way." Naomi and Carter came through the back door. Carter had the paperwork. Naomi had her badge. 2 deputies came in behind me. Gerald stepped out from the side hallway. The room reorganized itself around all of this very quickly, guests stepping back. The woman setting her glass down, carefully, voices going low. Carter walked directly to Patrice, who was standing near the bookshelf with a cocktail and the kind of dress that announces itself. "Patrice Booker," he said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse and fraudulent use of financial instruments, felony counts under Tennessee state law. Federal charges relating to the tax evasion matter will follow within 48 hours." Her face went the color of old chalk. Her hand shook hard enough that the cocktail would have spilled if the deputy had not taken it gently from her fingers before the handcuffs went on. Gerald found me near the fireplace and put a hand briefly on my shoulder. "Done," he said. "Done," I agreed. The guests left steadily the way people leave when an evening has become something other than what they came for. The neighbor from 4 houses down stopped at the door. "Dawn, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." I told her I knew that, and I meant it. When the room was empty, I sat in my armchair, the one Patrice had moved 6 inches to the left, and Naomi had moved back before the guests arrived. Frank sat on the couch. Naomi leaned in the kitchen doorway with the expression of someone who has just watched 8 months of work land exactly where it was supposed to. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Frank said, "You want some coffee?" "Yes," I said. "I really do." Cheryl left while the room was still half full. She came through the hallway with a bag over one shoulder, and her coat already zipped to the chin, the way Ellie used to zip it for her when she was small. She moved through the remaining guests without stopping, finding the open space between people the way water finds the low ground. At the front door, she stopped. She turned around and looked at me across the room. Her face had none of its usual arrangement left in it. 3 weeks of careful composure had come apart in one evening, and what was underneath looked raw and young and genuinely lost. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then, "I'm sorry, Dad." Her voice broke on the last word in a way she could not have controlled. I looked at my daughter, the face I had known for 38 years. The person she had been, and the person she had become, both of them, present at once, in a way that made my chest ache with something that was not quite anger and not quite forgiveness, but somewhere honestly between the two. "I know," I said. "Go home, Cheryl." She walked out. The door closed. Frank refilled my coffee without being asked. The rest of the guests left within the hour. Gerald packed his folder and shook my hand. Naomi left at 11, looking tired in the way that goes deeper than sleep. Frank stayed until midnight and took 2 requests before he finally went home. Then the house was just mine again, the way it was always meant to be. I sat by the fireplace and did not think about very much. Just looked at Ellie's pictures on the walls, Ellie's books on the shelf, the 2 rocking chairs on the porch, visible through the back window. Still there. Still exactly where they had always been. 3 weeks passed. Naomi brought paperwork on a Tuesday. Marcus's trial was set for February. Aggravated neglect of an elderly person, 2 counts of forgery, plus 3 federal counts of criminal tax fraud. The U.S. Attorney's Office had filed separately from the state charges. Marcus was looking at the possibility of more than a decade, and he would serve it. Patrice had entered a guilty plea the week before. Conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, 1 count of fraudulent financial instrument use. She cooperated with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation. The system working the way it was designed to. She was not walking away untouched, and that was enough for me. On a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the party, I sat on the porch. The 2 white oak chairs were side by side, the way they had always been worn smooth at the armrests from 40 years of evenings. I sat in mine. Ellie's sat empty beside me the way it had sat every morning for 2 years. The December sky was that particular clear blue, that only happens in East Tennessee in winter, clean and hard like glass you could see through to whatever was on the other side. My hip was better. Physical therapy on Monday. 3 more weeks and I would be walking without assistance. The back gate opened. Frank came through with 2 cups from the coffee shop on the corner. No announcement. Coffee already in hand. He handed me one, pulled his lawn chair around to the porch and sat down. A cardinal landed on the fence post at the edge of the yard, sharp red against the December blue, and stayed a moment before moving on. The wind chime Ellie had hung from the eave turned slowly on its hook. She said the house needed a sound, I said. Frank looked up at it. Sounds like Ellie. Everything good in this house does, I said. The side gate opened. Naomi came around the corner with a bakery box from Market Street. She stopped when she saw us, her expression doing the thing it did when she arrived somewhere she was expected, and was surprised anyway to find herself welcome. Am I early? You're exactly on time, I said. Sit down. She sat on the top porch step box between her feet, both hands around her coffee. She looked comfortable there. Not like a guest, like someone who had quietly decided this was somewhere she belonged. How's the hip? She asked. Better, I said. Frank drank his coffee. Margaret wants to know if you're coming to dinner Thursday. Tell her yes. Tell her I'll bring something. She'll say you don't need to. Tell her anyway. I looked at the empty chair beside me, at the worn armrests, at the morning light falling across it the same way it had fallen every morning for 40 years. Marcus and Cheryl had looked at me and seen a burden. They measured my worth by what I cost them, and they got it completely wrong. Because worth is not a number that shrinks as the years add up. It is not something a bad hip can diminish or a wheelchair can erase. It is in the chair beside you, in the people who show up without being asked. In the wind chime a woman hung 40 years ago because she believed a home needed a sound, and that is still turning, still making that small, clear note in the cold December air. She would have liked this morning, I said. Frank looked at the empty chair, then at Naomi on the step, then out at the yard. Well, he said, you've got people here. Yeah, I said. I do. There is one thing I keep coming back to even now. Marcus and Cheryl looked at me and saw a burden. A man past his useful days worth nothing more than the house he lived in. They measured my entire value by what I cost them, and they got the answer completely wrong. Because the thing they never once considered was this. The people who show up for you are not always the ones you were born to. Sometimes they are the ones you helped when you did not have to, the ones your wife believed in before anyone else did, the ones who drive a mountain road at midnight and refuse to keep going when they find you there. I did not plan for any of that. I just tried for 40 years to be a decent man. God took care of the rest. If there is anything I would tell someone walking a road like mine, do not wait until the door is already closing to protect what matters. Talk to a lawyer. Trust your instincts. Let the people who love you actually help you. Do not make my mistake of staying quiet too long, because you do not want to believe what you are already seeing. That is my story. A grandpastry's kind of story, the kind nobody plans to have, but that teaches you everything worth knowing about who actually loves you. A revenge story that was never really about revenge at all. It was about dignity, about what a person is truly worth when the people closest to them decide the answer is nothing. If this family revenge story meant something to you tonight, if any part of it hit close to home, drop a comment below and tell me about it. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to stay for the next one, the subscribe button is right there. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. It means more than you know. One more thing. The stories coming up contain some fictional elements crafted purely to explore the kind of truths that real life sometimes cannot say out loud. If that is not for you, no hard feelings, step away and find what fits you best. But if you are staying, I will see you in the next one.